She said, "You snore too loud. From now on, sleep on the couch." I said, "No problem." What she didn't know was that I had a whole apartment waiting. And when I stopped coming home altogether, her world fell apart. When you first get married, people warn you about the little annoyances: toothpaste caps, thermostat wars, laundry left unfolded. What no one told me was that snoring, something I had no conscious control over, would become a weapon in my wife's arsenal of complaints. At first, it was subtle. A sigh here, a shove with her elbow there. "You're snoring again," she'd mumble in the middle of the night. I'd roll over, half asleep, trying to stop. But the complaints grew louder, sharper, more bitter. One Tuesday night, after a brutal 12-hour workday, I fell into bed barely able to keep my eyes open. My head hadn't even sunk into the pillow properly before she elbowed me. "Seriously?" she snapped, sitting up dramatically. "You haven't even been asleep for 10 minutes, and it's already unbearable." I rubbed my eyes groggy. I didn't even know I was snoring yet. "That's the problem. You never know." "I'm sick of it," she said, her tone firm, almost commanding. "From now on, you're sleeping on the couch. I need real rest. I can't keep putting up with this." For a moment, I thought about arguing, reminding her that I had worked too, that I was exhausted, that maybe the problem wasn't just me. But looking at her, arms crossed, face set like stone, I realized nothing I said would matter. So I just nodded. "Okay." I got up, grabbed a pillow, and walked to the couch. She probably thought she'd won, that she'd asserted her dominance in the relationship by relegating me to the living room. But here's the thing, I'd always had a backup plan. Before we got married, I owned a small apartment downtown. It wasn't glamorous, one bedroom, a little balcony overlooking a noisy street, furniture that had seen better days. But it was mine. When we decided to move in together, she insisted we sell it, combine finances, build our future together. I nodded, but deep down, something told me to hold on to it. Call it intuition, call it self-preservation. I told her the market was bad, the timing wasn't right, and she eventually dropped it. So, the apartment sat there, quiet, untouched, waiting. I'd been paying utilities just to keep it functional, and every now and then I'd stop by to pick up mail. But for the most part, it was frozen in time. My bachelor pad in hibernation. That first night on the couch, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, her words replaying in my head. "From now on, you're sleeping on the couch." Like I was some sort of pet being banished for bad behavior. She hadn't asked if I wanted to try earplugs or white noise machines or even see a doctor. No compromise, just punishment. And that was the moment I decided I wasn't going to play along. The very next evening, when she reminded me that the couch is your spot now, I smiled, kissed her on the cheek, and said, "No problem." Then, once she was in bed scrolling through her phone, I quietly slipped out. Driving through the city streets toward my old apartment felt surreal, like I was reclaiming a piece of myself I'd given up. The key slid into the lock with a satisfying click, and when I stepped inside, the smell of familiarity hit me. The air was a little stale, but everything was exactly where I'd left it. My worn-in recliner, my bookshelves, even a half-finished jigsaw puzzle on the coffee table. I set my pillow down on my old bed, lay back, and exhaled. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt truly relaxed. No judgmental sighs, no complaints, no cold shoulder. Just peace. The next morning, I returned home before she woke up. She assumed I'd been on the couch all night. She didn't even look at me when she got up for work, just muttered, "Hope you enjoyed your snoring throne." But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't her victim anymore. I had a sanctuary, a place she couldn't touch. Over the next several days, I kept up the routine. We'd have dinner together, maybe watch TV. Then she'd remind me, sometimes smugly, "Couch time." I'd smile, grab my pillow, and walk out. Except I wasn't going to the couch. I was driving downtown, unlocking the door to my freedom. At first, she didn't notice. Why would she? She was too busy basking in her self-imposed victory. But little cracks started to show. One Saturday morning, she frowned when she saw me fully rested. "Strange," she said, tilting her head. "You don't look like someone who's been tossing and turning on a lumpy sofa." I shrugged. "Guess I'm adjusting." Another time, she went to grab laundry and asked, "Where's that navy shirt you usually wear? Haven't seen it in a while." What I didn't tell her was that it was hanging neatly in the closet of my old apartment. The more time I spent at my place, the more alive I felt. I rediscovered hobbies I'd abandoned, started reading again, even called up old friends to hang out nearby. Meanwhile, she thought she was teaching me a lesson by forcing me onto the couch. What she didn't realize was that I was teaching myself something far more valuable. I didn't need her to feel at home. And soon, her punishment would backfire spectacularly. For the first week, she didn't question a thing. In her mind, she had won the battle, and I was dutifully snoring my life away on the couch like a chastised teenager. But the thing about lies, or omissions, is that sooner or later, people start sniffing around. It began innocently enough. One evening after dinner, she tossed me the remote and plopped down on the couch. "You don't mind, do you? I need to stretch out. My back's killing me." I froze for a second, then forced a casual smile. "Nah, go ahead." Her eyes narrowed. "You don't sound upset. Usually, you guard this couch like it's your throne." I laughed it off. Guess I've gotten used to it. She didn't press further, but I could feel her suspicion simmering. The truth was, the more time I spent at my old apartment, the more distance I felt from her, not just physically, but emotionally. I'd walk in the door, play the part of the dutiful husband for a few hours, then retreat back to my sanctuary. And with each night away, the idea of home shifted further from the house we shared. It didn't help that she started slipping into old habits of control. She began making little comments like, "Did you even water the plants? Or is the couch too demanding?" And, "I hope you're not getting too comfortable out there. You'll never get back in here if you are." One Friday night, she even made a spectacle of it. We'd had some friends over for drinks, just a casual evening of wine and board games. As everyone was getting ready to leave, she clinked her glass and said with a smirk, "Oh, by the way, if any of you need a couch to crash on, don't worry, my husband's already claimed it full time. Snoring banishment, you know." The group laughed politely. I chuckled too, though it felt like being poked in the ribs in front of an audience. But one of my friends gave me a curious look. Later, he texted, "You're not seriously sleeping on the couch, are you? I thought you still had your old place." That was the first time I admitted it out loud. "Yeah, I do. Been staying there instead." His reply was instant. "Smart man. Don't let her play you." The following week, her questions started piling up. She noticed my phone charging in odd places, clothes missing from our drawers, even a faint scent of cologne she didn't recognize, because it was the bottle I'd left at my apartment years ago. Then came the night she decided to test me. I walked through the door around midnight, trying to be quiet. She was sitting in the dark, waiting. "Where were you?" Her voice was sharp, but not panicked, calculated. "I couldn't sleep," I said calmly. "Went for a drive, cleared my head." She stood up slowly. "Funny, because I checked the couch, and your pillow wasn't there. Neither was your blanket." My heart thudded once hard, but instead of panicking, I smiled. Maybe I folded them. She stepped closer, squinting at me like she could peel back my skin with her eyes. "You don't even fold laundry. Why would you fold a blanket?" I shrugged. Maybe I'm changing. She didn't believe me. I could see it in the way her lips pressed together, her arms crossed tight. But she didn't have proof. Not yet. The very next day, she tried a different tactic, passive aggression. She texted me at lunch. "Hope the couch isn't too lonely without you. Maybe I should start checking hotels for your little adventures." I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, "Don't worry. I'm sleeping just fine." I didn't bother clarifying. Let her stew. The truth was, I was sleeping just fine. Better than I had in years. My old apartment had become more than just a retreat. It was a rebirth. I cooked what I wanted, listened to music she hated, spread out in bed without worrying about elbows in my ribs. It wasn't just about escaping her punishment anymore. It was about reclaiming independence. But freedom has a way of leaving footprints. One Sunday, I forgot to delete the GPS history on my car. She borrowed it to run errands, and when she returned, her face was pale and tight. "You've been downtown," she said flatly. "Yeah," I admitted, sipping my coffee. "Stopped by the old place. Needed to grab a few things." Her jaw clenched. "And how many nights have you been grabbing a few things?" I set down the cup slowly. "Enough." Silence stretched between us like a taut wire. She wanted to explode, I could tell, but she didn't. Instead, she forced a brittle smile and said, "Well, I hope your little bachelor pad is comfortable." That was the moment I knew the game had changed. She wasn't just annoyed anymore. She was scared. Not of me cheating. She didn't accuse me of that. No, she was scared of losing control. Of realizing that her punishment hadn't trapped me. It had freed me. And the more she pushed, the more I realized. Maybe I didn't want to come back home at all. Update 1.by the second month. The tension in our marriage wasn't just cracks. It was full-blown fractures running through the walls. And instead of patching them, she was grabbing a hammer and swinging wildly. At first, she tried to play it cool. The sarcastic comments stopped, and suddenly she was sweet again. She'd ask if I wanted her to cook dinner or if I wanted to pick the movie. Little things she hadn't done in years. It might have worked if it didn't feel so hollow, like a salesperson trying to win back a customer they thought they'd already lost. But when her niceties didn't lure me back to the couch or to her bed, the gloves came off. One night, I got back to the apartment late, around 1 a.m. I'd been working late on a project, then stopped by a bar near the office for a beer with a coworker. My phone buzzed constantly during that time, but I ignored it. By the time I got home, there were 14 missed calls and 9 texts. The last message read, "If you're with someone else, don't bother coming home at all." I laughed out loud reading it, because she finally said the quiet part out loud. In her mind, the only explanation for me not following her orders was another woman. It never even occurred to her that I simply preferred my own peace. The next morning, she showed up at my apartment. I hadn't given her the new keypad code, so she sat outside, waiting, like a cat scratching at a door. I heard the knock, checked through the peephole, and debated pretending I wasn't home. But curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door halfway. She looked disheveled, hair messy, eyes red from crying or lack of sleep. She pushed against the door like she owned the place. "Are you serious right now?" she hissed. "Living here? Like some divorced guy?" I leaned against the frame, calm as ever. "Better than sleeping on a couch." Her jaw clenched. "This isn't funny." "I'm not laughing." She stepped back, arms crossed. "You've made your point. Congratulations. You're independent. You've got your own place. Happy." I tilted my head. "Yeah, actually, I am." That shut her up. For the first time, I saw it click. The realization that I wasn't bluffing, wasn't sulking, wasn't secretly begging to come back. I meant it. And she hated it. She tried a new tactic after that, guilt. She'd call during the day with little barbs like, "Do you even care how this looks? Our neighbors think our marriage is falling apart." Or, "My mother asked why you're never home." What am I supposed to tell her? Once, she even tried to corner me with tears. I came home to pick up some files, and she followed me around the house crying, saying things like, "Do you really hate me this much? Am I that terrible? After everything we've been through?" I didn't take the bait. I just looked at her and said, "You told me to sleep on the couch until I apologized." I didn't apologize. This is the result. She didn't have a comeback for that. By week 9, her desperation turned into something darker, anger mixed with panic. She started showing up at my apartment uninvited more often. Sometimes she'd just sit in her car outside, waiting for me to come out. Once, she even followed me to the grocery store, cornered me in the parking lot, and demanded to know who I was really seeing. "Why does there have to be someone else?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Because no man just leaves," she spat. "Not unless he's running to someone." I shook my head. "Maybe you just underestimated what it means to push someone too far." Her silence told me I was right. But the real turning point came 2 weeks later. I came home one Saturday morning to grab a few tools. The guest room I had converted into my exile space was completely stripped. My gaming setup, my books, even the bedding gone. In their place, she had arranged her workout gear, yoga mats, and a Peloton bike. When I confronted her, she just smiled thinly. "If you're going to live at your apartment, then I might as well use the space for something useful." That was the moment I realized she'd written me out of the house entirely. She wanted me gone, but she didn't want to admit she wanted a divorce, because that would mean she failed. So, I did what she never expected. I stopped pretending the house was still my home. I shifted everything, mail, bills, even my driver's license, to my apartment. I didn't tell her. I just disappeared from the life she thought she controlled. And the more she tried to drag me back, the less I wanted to return. The couch was never the punishment. It was the key. Now, she's the one pacing through an empty house at night, while I sleep soundly in a bed that's finally mine again. Final update. By month 4, the marriage wasn't just fractured. It was ashes scattered on the wind. The only person who didn't seem to realize it yet was my wife. She had cycled through all the stages: mockery, guilt trips, fake sweetness, anger. The only one left was desperation. It came to a head on a Tuesday night. I had just finished grading some papers for my evening class. Teaching was something I'd picked up part-time, something she used to mock as a hobby that doesn't pay the bills. But sitting at my desk in my apartment, surrounded by quiet and peace, I realized I hadn't felt this alive in years. Then the banging started. Not knocking, banging. My door shook as if someone was trying to break in. When I opened it, there she was, hair disheveled, mascara smudged, holding a half-empty bottle of wine. "Why are you doing this to me?" she slurred. I kept my voice calm. "Doing what?" This disappearing act. Acting like I'm the villain. "I was just mad that night, okay? I didn't mean for you to move out. I didn't mean for you to," she hiccuped, then wiped her face. "Ruin everything." I almost laughed. Ruin everything? I had quietly packed up, moved on, found peace. She was the one unraveling because her throne was empty. "Go home," I said softly. She shook her head violently. "No, you're coming with me. Right now. We're fixing this." I leaned against the doorframe. "You told me to sleep on the couch until I apologized." I didn't apologize. Instead, I took control of my life. That's the only thing that got fixed. Her eyes filled with tears again. "You're really going to throw everything away? 10 years. Just like that." I tilted my head. "You threw it away when you decided respect was conditional. You don't get to backtrack now." For a second, she was silent. Then her face twisted into something bitter. "Fine," she spat. "Go play bachelor in your little shoebox. You'll come crawling back when you realize no one else will put up with you." She stormed off down the hall. I didn't stop her, but I didn't realize until later that she'd left her wine bottle behind, sitting on my entry table like a trophy of defeat. That was the last time she came to my apartment. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers arrived in the mail. No dramatic confrontation, no screaming match, just a clean envelope with her signature already inked on the dotted line. My lawyer called the terms favorable. She clearly just wanted it over. What surprised me wasn't her speed, it was her silence. The woman who once filled my phone with hundreds of texts a day didn't even send me one last rant. She went dark. Mutual friends told me she'd been venting online, though. Posts like, "Some men can't handle a strong woman," or "Crazy how someone can just give up on you like you never mattered." But here's the thing. She was wrong on both counts. I never gave up on her. I gave up on being treated like furniture. And I didn't leave because she was strong. I left because she thought strength meant belittling the person who loved her. And once that truth settled in, the peace that followed was indescribable. 6 months after the separation, I bumped into her at a mutual friend's cookout. She looked thinner, tired, and oddly smaller, like all the fire had gone out of her. She gave me a tight smile. "You look good." I nodded. "Thanks. You too." Awkward silence stretched between us until she finally whispered, "You really never looked back, did you?" "No," I said honestly. Her eyes watered, but she nodded, almost like she expected it. Then she turned and walked away, swallowed up by the crowd. That was the last real conversation we ever had. Now, a year later, I look around my apartment. No, my home, and it feels like a sanctuary. I've filled it with things I love, hobbies I picked back up, friends who stop by without judgment. I don't sleep on a couch. I don't sleep in a marriage bed built on conditions and power games. I sleep in peace. Sometimes people ask me if I regret not fighting harder to fix things. I tell them the truth. She told me who she was the night she banished me to the couch. I just finally believed her. And when I believed her, I found freedom.